Divyajyoti Rajdev, or DJ, and I'll be presenting today's session. Learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. So in every session, that's what we try to do. We try to take your questions from community and the ones that you send us through Twitter or email and provide you step-by-step live answers to them. And you can always send us your follow-ups on chat. So the crew is me. I'm a data scientist. Then we have Billy. He's Director of Customer Success. Robert does post-processing for us, and Anna, who's our campaign coordinator. Today, I'll be giving the featured session on dashboard design, going from drab to effective dashboards. Our team is based out of United States, Palo Alto, but we have attendees from over 101 countries. Thank you, Anna. So I'm going to get started with the featured session for today, which is going from dirty and drab dashboards to effective and fab dashboards. What happens is that Spotfire provides you all the raw materials and all the tools, different visualizations, different types of configuration, training resources to create good dashboards. But a lot of it is also in the skill of the analyst, in being able to get your data and get your visuals in a form that conveys the information that you're trying to convey. So today we're going to take the example of one dashboard put together by my very talented senior data scientist, but it wasn't really public facing at all. There were a number of flaws in it. It could not be consumed in its current manner. And just by looking at stepwise iterations and improvements to that dashboard, we're going to define what is a good dashboard and give you little tips and tricks in Spotfire around how you can achieve it. So let's talk about the goals for this session. The goal is not to make it pretty, it is to make it effective. We can't define knowledge-based improvements or give you a fixed recipe that will contain every single scenario that can ever happen and you can just look it up and find out what to do. That's not what we'll try to do, but rather to give you a common sense approach within a tiered framework to dashboarding. And that way you can understand and you can quantify what stage you're at and how much further you need to go and how much further you need to improve on the different aspects. Then we're not going to be experts. We're not going to be able to take over the jobs of any industrial database folks, but we can get to visual insights much faster. So a lot of people use dashboarding, how to use PowerPoint, which is after they come up with the visual insight, they just want to present it, which is fine, but it's a very limiting approach to creating dashboards and data visualization. A lot of the power lies in how your visual thinking works at a much higher bandwidth than, say, your oral communication or reading. And so we have to truly be able to optimize on that visual pattern seeking part of our brain. Then finally, the goal is not to become a data whiz psychic and to have inexplicable powers, but rather to get a vocabulary to transfer knowledge. It's very important when you build out your dashboard to not end up the only person on the team who can do it without being able to communicate it. So you shouldn't say things like, oh, that looks right, that looks good, and that's why I did that. That's not really the vocabulary that we're going to talk about. Rather, we're going to talk about things like what is the focal point, what types of analysis, like who's the audience, and based on that, we'll basically build a vocabulary such that once you understand how to do it, you can also explain it to somebody else. I'm aware that, thanks for the message. I'm aware that I'm not on a slideshow because I'm going to be moving between slides and Spotfire. So if I go into presenter mode, it doesn't let me switch that, but thanks for the heads up. So talking about the tiered approach, when we start out with a dashboard, we start with dashboards that are drab and dirty, and we have to basically make them tidy. Then the next stage after you've made it tidy is to make it effective, and then you would make it fabulous. So within a tidy dashboard, right, up to this point, and you can see that you start with, completely disorganized room, nothing is in its place. Now, the typical consumers of a tidy dashboard would be your engineering audience, would be your data scientists, statisticians, mathematicians, basically everybody internal. So concerns that you have with that audience are whether or not your dashboard is readable. Are the titles readable? Are the fonts readable? Do your visualizations convey what they show, or is it just a bunch of data and you can't really figure out what it says? The other thing is chart junk. So 50 define chart junk as anything that doesn't add information to a dashboard. So if something's too big, if there's a lot of contrast for no reason, there's a lot of white space which is distracting, all of that comes under chart junk. So that's the first stage of your dashboard building and evolution. The second is moving towards an effective dashboard. So right now you can see that, this is just an empty fence and all your animals have run away. This is in the middle of nowhere. The gate is completely useless. It's not going to hold back anyone from entering and moving into this territory. So in a way, this dashboard this type or this stage of a dashboard does not have any functional purpose. So you have to question whether the types of visualizations that you're using, if they are appropriate or not, if that's the best way of representing that information. There will also be some architectural issues. So for example, a lot of times a certain tool needs your data to be in a particular form to create certain visualizations. So for example, if you're creating bar charts, you have to have X and Y, and the X and Y has to be in wide format. It can't be in tall format. Those come under architectural concerns, where you have to shape your data in a way that it fits into the tool that you're trying to work with. The last thing is within this is proximity issues. So I work with a lot of customers where you ask them, okay, what's the most important thing for you to discover or for you to monitor? And they say, okay, for me, the most important thing is how much are we making in profit in quarter-to-quarter comparison of our sales. All right, then I ask them, okay, show me where this data is. And from page number 1, they go to page number 5, they filter down on the quarters, then they go to page number 3, and then they would look at, sales reps. So in a sense, to answer your most important questions, you shouldn't have to jump from one page to the other. Things that are more important should belong together and should be closer to the front of the dashboard or closer to pages that are clearly titled so that you can access them. So this audience is going to be your analyst, is going to be your customer, your consumer, your C-level executive. And finally, we come to the fabulous setting. Here, these are dashboards that are for public interest. So you would expect a large audience to consume them. Data-driven journalism, the types of graphics that you've started to see in Wall Street Journal and publications like that, they come under this. But a lot of times, let's say when you're preparing company blogs, when you want to use your internal analysis, you want to use that data and it has to go on an external medium that's going to be consumed by a lot of people. We follow the principles within this particular tier in order to make it fabulous. And you can see it's very monochrome right now. It doesn't really look that great. So we're going to improve that. Let's actually start with a Spotfire example. Here I have a dashboard that was going to be shown on the main stage for Houston Energy Forum, which is one of our biggest flagship events. And this is the form in which my very senior data scientist configured it. And if you know what you're looking for, then it's fine. This talks about wealth reduction and the compositions between the different operators and how they're distributed. So if you know what you're looking for, this is okay. But for a new end user, this is completely unintuitive. So this is the basic dashboard that we started with. So let's start to think about all the things that aren't great about it, and I encourage you to think with me. So for example, you see there's a lot of pie charts. You don't really know like what to compare to what. This particular format is not conducive to comparisons. Then on this chart, the data is very densely represented. You don't really know how to read this or what exactly is happening in this map chart, like why is there a square array and why are these points different. Then there's no particular order. So for example, you can see the operator distribution over here, but all the operators are sort of lined up over here, and the X and Y labels aren't descriptive as much. And the colors are all over the place. There are grid lines where you don't need them. This is way too big. The font sizes are too big. So basically, on every tier of the dashboard that we defined, we have a number of issues. So for example, this is for model that was built for predicting well production. And now all of the three models are layered on top of each other so that you can only see the first one. You can't really see what's happening with the green one or what's happening with the blue one. And those are just things that will come under now effective dashboard design. So let's go back and just look at what all the different problems that we just diagnosed. Everything that's in orange, that's a vocabulary word. So when in our goals we said that we want to define a vocabulary for talking about things like this is what I meant. So you have to catch non-intuitive titles. You have to catch unreadable fonts, meaningless colors. There was no eye tracking. So if I go back over here, if you look at a particular dashboard, a particular figure within this, close your eyes and look at it again, you will end up looking at a different part of the dashboard, or you will be stuck only staring at the pie chart. That's meant by no focal point. You keep jumping between visualizations. There's mixed themes. So some visuals are dark, others are white. Again, pie charts, not good. Every time you have more than one pie chart, you have to seriously reconsider the use of it. Then finally, what is the reading order? Are we going top to bottom? Are we going left to right? Is it clockwise? That's not obvious. And finally, you have a dense plot. So this is a dense plot. Even on page number 3, this is a dense plot. So you're not able to compare model performance. You're not able to find patterns in the data. From here, let me show you the next stage, which is the tidy stage, which I've cleaned up a little bit. All I've done over here is I've gone in and removed some of the empty values. So let's go to layer settings, data, and you see that in the data limiting, I've removed the empty values, and that's gotten rid of that very annoying array of points that I had. Now, I've not changed the type of visualization because remember, at this point, we're focusing on chart junk and we're focusing on readability. So all the contrast in the background, that was chart junk. So I got rid of all the different colors in the background. I fixed the titles, I gave the descriptors, and basically initiated some sort of a reading order within this. Now, within readability, there was also this visualization. Notice how I haven't really changed much about it right now, but we will when we move to the effective stage of the dashboard. So going back to tidy changes, I have before you have a completely disorganized space where nothing belongs in its place and you can't really find something that you're looking for. Moving to after, where you have a much clearer and organized representation of the room. So created reading order, added custom titles, descriptions, fixed all fonts and sizes, changed, and then for Charjang, the easiest way to get rid of all of those contrast areas is to simply get a theme from any of your favorite DSPs. So if I go in and do this, this is my custom theme. I can either go and configure every one of these visualization areas manually, or I can go in and just say that I want to import it from a file that already exists. And I can choose one black DXP that's set up very well to take care of all of these issues. And I can have one light background DXP and just keep reusing it. So it's very easy to correct for things like this. Then a lot of smaller changes that are harder to notice but create a lot of impact. So for example, I removed all the axis selectors that weren't important. Instead, I changed the titles. I removed the grid lines, I removed the clutter from the map, and finally fixed the empty values. So this is basically your first part of the transformation. In the second part of the transformation, remember here we're talking about functional things. You know, is it the right type of visualization? Is it the right thing to do? So here, all I did was I right-clicked, and let's actually go ahead and do it so that you see how easy it is. So from my tidy dashboard, switch visualization, change it to bar chart. And once it is the bar chart, I'm going to change it to horizontal bar chart. And within horizontal bar charts, I can then go into properties and labels and select only one of them. And that's it. That was how simple it was to 3 clicks to change that visualization to this one. That's basically where we're at within this page. Now on the next page, you saw that a lot of the points were overlapping. So I solved them in 2 different ways. One of them is basically by just increasing the transparency, so that even though the points are very dense, you can kind of see that the blue ends here and the blue ends here. You can see that, you know, the pink extends much beyond your average prediction. So a boosted regression tree has a larger prediction range. And finally, what I've done is I've allowed the user to select the column using a property control. So you can set up property controls to select from column selection, where you give it a data table and you select the columns within that data table that the property can access or the property can choose the names from. What that lets you do is now if I click on them, I can not only select and plot a few, like whichever one I want, but I can also select the drawing order. So I can draw this one first and then I can put this one. So those are just some of the features that we did when we moved towards an effective dashboard. So within functional, we changed the graph type. We asked whether pie chart was the best way to represent that information. We added transparency to scatter plot. Within architectural, we added data selection and control using document property. And the other alternative was, instead of giving column names, I could have changed the structure of the data itself, but I didn't want to do that. And then proximity, we didn't really have any proximity issues. Finally, moving to the third stage, because this was supposed to be a main stage demo, I had to pick some colors. So what I did was I basically took the same color palette from within this region and combined it to have, like, from that, I derived a gradient that I applied to all of my operators. Now, because all of my operators are inherently similar, that is, they are types of operators, I could use a gradient color scheme. If they were completely different things, so for example, if I was using ceramic, IFC, sand, and so on, I would not use a gradient. I would use a specific categorical color scheme. And I picked some colors on this one as well. I made some last minute size font changes. And that's it. Those were 3 stages of dashboard evolution. So within Fabulous, we had color scheme from DXP, and created a visual impact using our colors. Finally, the last thing that I do want to show you is a couple of pages that you can find more information on. So let me search for the same thing, and I'm using Google search just to show you how easy it is to find it. And you end up on the landing page that's basically around visualizations and dashboard. And this has best practices. It has different devices. If you're working on mobile versus if you're working on iPad, it has a bunch of our previous webinars that we had on the same theme. But it also has different types of visualizations and all the details created around it. So for example, we don't have a Pareto chart by default, but you could configure it using a combination chart. We don't have a donor chart, but you can configure it using a map chart. And for charts that we do have, like for example, KPI charts, what are the different variations that you can do? So doing a drill down, doing an action, coloring it by categorical versus the continuous measure. And finally, the tips and tricks landing page, where we keep introducing a number of shorter how-to tutorials around data access, visualization and mapping, advanced analytics, and so on. So I encourage you to look at these and definitely leave us your feedback and what you'd like to see more of. Moving on to today's session, we had a lot of really great questions on community. So it's really good that you guys are making use of TIBCO community for asking and answering questions. Also, vote up the answers that you think are best and solve your problem. The other way to get in touch with us, so what I do is before every session, I would go through the TIBCO community and pick up unanswered questions and solve them stepwise. But let's say you do have sensitive data. You can email us at drspotfire@tibco.com with your data, and so that when we show the solution, we won't show your data as much and you still have a way to get in touch. I would also like to recommend that you look at TIBCO support and TIBCO education, and Anna is going to send you chat resources for how to reach those different places. So for example, if there are questions that go above the expertise or time constraints of Dr. Spotfire, you're still able to get them answered. Let's look at range. This is the first question that we got. Actually, this is from last time where we didn't have enough time to completely solve it. So I'm picking it up today. What the user wants is they basically have, they want to resize the y-axis based on the end user inputting the values into document properties, the min and the max. Here's a script just to show you how to do that. I haven't plugged in the script because it is definitely going to work. So, but I want to walk you through the logic a little bit. The first thing that you have to do is you have to be able to access line chart. Line chart is a base visualization type that the user wants to work on. So you have to import it from application visuals. The other thing that you need from application visuals is the access range, because once you define your limits in the property, you're going to need access range in order to provide that value to. The last is data property class, because we're saving these values in document properties. You're going to need data property class to manipulate that. So you define your variables where min is document property ymin, max is document property ymax. The way you create document properties is by going to edit, document property, properties, new. Define a property type. So let's call it ymin. Change the data type to integer or real or whatever your requirement is. Give it a starter value. Let's say I give it 3. Now, let me show you how we actually change that document property that we just configured. So let's create a text area. And within this text area, I'm going to insert this document property that I just created and provided a slider. Now my slider can have a numerical range, so let's say 1 to 10,000, and oops, yeah, so it generates to me values. I have to increase my value interval. And you just saw that the interface guides you towards what your action should be. So even if you do end up doing something that doesn't want to access, it's going to prompt you to correct it immediately. So now that we save it, you can see that changing this changes my document property. So let's actually go in and insert another label for the same document property. And now I can see that, you know, the changes that I make over here get reflected within this. Oh, it didn't. So let's configure this. Okay. So it's hooked up to the wrong one. So it's very easy to now change it and get it to the range that I want it to be at. So this is how you would set up your ymin and ymax and then pass it to your IronPython script. This takes your min and max values and provides it to this access range namespace. And finally, you're providing that to your line chart plot and resetting your min and max. That's how that's done. Any questions about it? And I'm just going through, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them on chat and Q&A. The next question that we had was this user was trying to create a PCA model in Spotfire. They found code which makes sense. It basically just takes your, just runs prcomp, the base function, on some data and extracts the particular prediction that they want from it, and they're trying to store it in a table. So I could have gone in and debugged this and looked at tear, why it's working, why it's not working. But there's a much simpler way to do this, which is that you don't need to build PCA from scratch. A lot of times in the data science team, we open source, not completely open source, but we provide the algorithms that we create for free on Exchange. So if I go to community.tipco.com and I go to Exchange, you can see a number of publications. So for example, this one came out, I think today or yesterday, and this one's again within the week. So we provide a number of these templates that you can basically download, plug in your data, and it's just going to work. And if it doesn't work, then you should provide us feedback, and we're going to look into improve it further and make it even more robust. So for this, I downloaded Financial Crime Buster template. So if I search here for financial crime, you can see that the wiki comes up and the template comes up. So it's quite easy to locate it once you know what you're looking for. Within that template, there'll be a zip file. When you extract it, you get these three things. You get the DXP, and you get a PDF, which is a white paper published by our senior staff data scientist, Anna, that explains exactly how it works and how every page, what every page looks at, and when you change your data, what should be your concerns, and how you ensure that it works as expected, how you interpret it, and also some nice little hints about the specialties within the template. So there are self-learning abilities. Once you create a model, how do you deploy it, and so on. So I'm just going to show you a few parts of the DXP. So the first page is a completely guided index where it tells you how to add your data. You can do your initial exploration. You can search for indicators. This has been set up to look at fraud right now, but more generally, you can apply it to any kind of use case that makes sense. So on part number 3 of this template, I have a PCA where if I go in and look at, this particular area, I can see transactions in factor space. Now, here is where, if you have to replace your data on the template, you would do File, Replace Data Table. So if you do Replace Data Table, you would use the base default table and replace it with your data. And then select the factor. So on your initial exploration, you'll be able to look at the different columns. And from the variables that you have selected, they'll show up here. So that when you select them and when you do run analysis, I can show you what this button is hooked up to, and it executes the PCA function. So the PCA data function is one of the many built into this particular template, but this one particularly is quite nice as it has a lot of the data cleaning done for you, and this is the main where the body of the PCA happens. So you can see that you're getting your predictors and it's doing a lot of cleaning, and over here is where it starts to run your PCA model. So it's the same functionality that the user was trying to do. So same function, extracting all the different pieces, but now you have this template that's built out that already does all of that. After you do that, it's going to refresh with your data, the component 1 and component 2, and then you can analyze the cloud and see how the factors line up based on your model. You can look at in factor space. You can see all different component 1 to up to about 8. Heuristically, about all the information can be contained within the first 8 factors. So all of that has already been set up, and there's also really good guidance about how to read what is happening. For example, over here, you have explanation about what these factor plots are. If you want to change them, how do you go about doing that? And then on this page is a bit more information, basically. So I encourage you to first look at templates. If you're not sure whether a template exists for what you want to do, please leave us a note or leave a community question based on that. Hey, I want to do A/B testing, or I want to do random forest. Is there a template available for that? And we can reply back with yes or no, or how can we guide you further. So basically, yeah, the solution to this was you don't need to build it from scratch. You can download the free template. I also put in a shortened link in there in case you didn't follow through with the whole search process. You can just type in this link, you'll be able to access it. And the template already contains the code and also how to interpret it. The next thing that we have is how do you combine columns? Oh, wait, let me check if there are any questions. All right. Moving to the next question, combine columns in the same table. So the user has a table that has 4 columns, date 1, projection 1, date 2, projection 2. How can they get Spotfire to combine these such that they're able to plot date 1 and 2 versus sum of projection 1 and 2? For doing this, I already did a little bit of prep work where I have a data table and I renamed the time column to date 1 and date 2, and I renamed the projection to projection 1 and projection 2. What I'm going to do is insert rows. So while inserting rows, I can actually select the same table. I don't need to load another table. I don't need to have another file. I can insert rows from literally the same table onto itself. So what I'm going to do is all my other columns are the same, but I'm simply going to eliminate the date column and the projection columns, and in about a second, you'll see why I'm doing that. So I'll match date 1 to date 2, and I'll match projection 1 to projection 2. And what that's going to do is that all of my columns above that will be the same. That is, all of these electronics, furniture, clothing, store number, all of these will be the same. But under date 1, now I would introduce date 2. Under projection 1, I would introduce projection 2. There are, of course, other ways to solve this problem, which might be more optimized to, let's say, space constraints. But in terms of usability, this was like the easiest way to go ahead with this. Now, you have to create a new name for the column that we just added. So basically, some way to identify the old rows to the new rows. I'm just going to call it row ID. And value for new rows is going to be, let's just say, staggered. And let this be original. Now, immediately, I get a warning saying there's a cyclic dependency because we're adding data from the same table onto itself. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. But if you do have frequently refreshing data, we might want to talk about other approaches. Once I've gone ahead and done that, let me bring down a bar chart where now I have date 1. And here I have projection 1. And I'm going to color it by row ID so that you can see, and actually let's switch this to scatter plot. Yeah. So now you can see that you actually added all of these. You're able to plot date 1 and date 2 at the same time because everything in blue is your original and everything in green is the new that you added. That's basically how you would combine columns in the same table. The other thing that I could have done is I could have just imported a new copy of the table, created a match, and then instead of adding all the columns, I could have just added those specific columns. So now instead of duplicating an entire table, I'm simply adding a few columns underneath. So that was the second way to go ahead with it. The next question that we have is around Spotfire median superimposed on scatterplot. So this user is trying to create a visualization similar. Okay, let's actually open this question URL so that we're able to see the image. Oh, so when I answer your question, I will most often give you a short way to recreate it in case you're not able to attend the session. But it's always good if you attend the session, you're able to see your problem step by step being taken to the solution. So the user has X and Y, and they have a scatter plot, and they want this median line to be drawn onto the visualization, but they want it to be sensitive to category. So for example, if you want to trellis by a particular category, if you want to color by a particular category, the median should be sensitive to that. So we solved that problem by initially, I think the users trying to create the over function and use expressions to do it. Now I'm going to show you a much simpler way of doing this. Let's start with a scatter plot where I have, let's take X and Y. Let's remove the color by, and you'll see why I'm removing it. I'll go to properties, and within properties, lines and curves, let's draw a horizontal line and edit it to be the aggregated value of median. And now I'm going to fix the labels a little bit. So let's put in a Y value label, and let's change the appearance to be a bit more visible, because right now it's not very visible. All right, and you can see that how I can define one per over here. So right now I have it defined as one per trellis panel. So what happens if I take my store location? This is a category. So let me pull up the data panel and show you the values within it. So I have 4 unique values: Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, Boston. It's a categorical column. And if I drop it on the trellis, you can see that I have a different one for each of these. It looks pretty similar because my data is within the same range. I can actually even change my data by going to the y-axis and defining multiple scales. So you can immediately see that every visualization every trellis panel got its own scale. So this is one scale and this is multiple scales. So even though it looks pretty similar, you can see from the labels that it's slightly different. Now let's go ahead and remove this from the trellis and add it instead to the color. Now you see this did not change because in my properties, I have it configured to 1 per trellis. I'm going to go in and change that to color, and that did not update it. Let me look into that. Oh, I had the wrong line selected. If I go in and update it, you'll see that I get 1 per color, although in this case, it's not recommended because it all ends up being very close together. So that's basically how that would be a much simpler way of solving the median superimposed on the scatter plot problem. Moving on, the next question is again related to curve draw. So as you saw, curve draw is extremely powerful. Right now, I only did the aggregate. Now we're going to do a custom curve draw, and you're going to see how it works. So this user, and let's again look at the question because I want to show you something interesting here. So a lot of times when we move from using one analytic tool to another, it's hard to change how we think about the product. So maybe product number 1 did things a certain way. When you come to product number 2, you expect the same thing to happen, which that's not how it works, unfortunately. So with Spotfire, the nice thing is that everything is very intuitive. It's very math-oriented. It's designed to be easy to use. So here, the user is trying to create 2 lines that are parallel to each other. So this is the example that has been given from Excel. And the way that they're doing that is y equal to x is their original line, and they're doing y equal to 0.1 and y equal to 10. So that creates the parallel lines in Excel. Now, when they do it in Spotfire, this is y equal to x, and this is y equal to 10x, and y equal to 0.1x, and that led to some amount of frustration. So let's talk about how Spotfire works, right? I just said that we are very math oriented. So the equation for a straight line is y equals to mx plus c. So where m is the slope and c is the intercept. So if you start, let's actually do it with an example. So let's do it with store number and furniture. And let's remove this. Okay. So now let's go in and draw a curve where I can add a curve draw. And this is y equals to x. And now if I basically add another curve, which is y equals to 10x, you'll see that you get a shift in slope. So this is the new line that you basically get. The reason why that happens is because this 10 is the slope part of it. This is not the intercept part of it. If you want parallel lines, you have to keep the slope constant. So creating 10x or 0.1x is never going to create parallel lines. So what I suggested was that we go in and edit this such that our slope is the same, but we add an intercept to it. And I'm going to add like 1,000 intercept because my data range is different. So if I add 10x, you won't be able to see it. And 10,000. So now you can see that I actually got a parallel line that I was looking for, and I can add another one, and that's going to be x minus, and that's going to be the other parallel line. So this is how basically you achieve the same effect in Spotfire. Let's try and convert this to a log scale. So I go into my x-axis and change it to a log scale. So I go to my y-axis, change that to a log scale. Now you see that the lines don't really show up. That's because either they collapsed or this wasn't the right formula for it. So if you change the scale, right, you have to reconfigure your curve draw to that updated scale because it's almost like creating a different visualization. So I wanted to show this, but with the question that I got, and we got a follow-up for that. So thank you so much. It's always nice to know when we get a follow-up. The user already had the original visualization in log scale. So when they configured the two new lines, they showed up perfectly on the log scale. So they weren't switching between scales. So I wanted to show you both ways of working with this problem. And hopefully that would have helped understand how the curve draw works and how you can actually put in any expression, just like a mathematical equation that you would put in. In fact, let me go ahead and show you a mathematical equation. So if I go to, let's change our scales back so that it's a little bit more predictable what's happening. And in our lines and curves, let's edit one of them to be x into x. So now I have a x squared curve. So you can see that it's a U, but it's very close to the origin because that's where the data is. But yeah, you can actually insert any kind of a mathematical equation. So the last piece that I wanted to show you for today is scrolling option on the legend tab. Now, let me insert a visualization, a couple of visualizations, and show you what the user is asking for. So let's remove this, and let's add furniture, and let's duplicate it, move it side by side, change the axis to something else, toys or something else. And here, you can see that the user's requirement is basically some kind of a master control, so that if they scroll down on one of them, the other one scrolls down automatically. Now, unfortunately, this feature is not available in Spotfire right now out of the box. So there are two workarounds to this. Actually, before we talk about the workarounds, here's what we do when something like that happens. So you go to community.tipco.com and you go to the ideas portal. The ideas portal is going to ask you to log in, and then you can actually submit your ideas based on what type of feature enhancement you want, who it's going to benefit. And we have product managers that exhaustively search the ideas portal for different requests the users have asked for, different enhancement requests, and that other users also vote up and comment on, saying why exactly it's going to fit their needs. And more often than not, it becomes a part of the product once it's been looked at in terms of how useful it is, how feasible it is. So if you have a feature request that's not in product, please submit it on ideas portal. Excuse me. The other way is basically having legends, having these scroll bars is not good to begin with. You might as well, you might as well increase the visualization area in order to fit in the legends. Now, sometimes your scroll bar was actually because of chart junk. So as you can see, all of these things are not really required. So if I go into my properties and in my legend, I select everything that I don't want. So I don't want this, I don't want this. I'll just keep a color by and nothing else. And even within a color by, I can remove the title so that I only have the axis selector. So let's close this. And instead of reconfiguring the whole thing, it's just easier to duplicate the visualization. Now duplicate the visualization, configure it to toys. And there you go. I don't have scroll bars on the legend anymore. There's one situation where that might not work. So for example, if you have a store number. So if I color by store number, and let's change store number to be categorical. So you see what I'm talking about. I use the data panel extensively. I never go into the nitty-gritties of the menu to change anything. The data panel is very easy to work with. And if I show you the source view, you can see exactly the changes that I've made. So I went in, I added rows, and over here, once I close this, my current operation with store number is going to become finalized. So now you can see store number actually became a category. So let's remove it and add it again so that it refreshes. And now you see that increasing the visualization area is not going to be that useful because all of this is redundant space simply because of how many categories I have. So for this, what I suggest doing is let's switch this visualization to bar chart, remove the y-axis, add store number on the x-axis. So let's have row count and remove any color by. Now I can add tags. And by adding tags, I'm basically creating a new column within the data to hand create some column value. So for example, let me call this store location group. And within this, I'm going to take about 1 to 30. In this, created a new one, which is called high, or actually this one's low. Low, medium, high. Here, I already have my selection, so I'm going to attach tagged row, attach it to marked rows. This one goes on to medium, and this one goes to high. And let's color by the new one that we created, which is store location group. So while I was selecting it, you see I missed a couple of columns, so I missed this one. So let me highlight only the untagged one. And once I've highlighted the untagged one, I know that it belongs in low. So I'm going to go ahead and touch it. Now let's say you feel that this particular tag is too narrow. You made a mistake and you want to add a couple more rows to it. Simply highlight it again and go through the same process. So it's going to ask you that the rows already have a tag. What do you want me to do? So you go ahead and say, okay, remove the old tag and attach the new tag to all the rows. And now you can see we have these 3 tags. So instead of visualizing by store number, now I can do a color by store number group. Store location group. So that's the second way of doing it. Why I recommend this approach is a lot of times you're going to have a lot of categories when you're looking at states. When you're looking at, let's say, states of America, you have 50 different colors. You don't need that much. If you group them into regions, it's going to be much easier. If you're looking at employee data, you may have thousands of colors per employee, but if you divide it into 4 or 5 departments, it will be a lot more manageable. So I definitely recommend this approach of grouping down your categories wherever possible, and that nicely ties into what we saw earlier about dashboard design. So this is making it a little bit more tidy compared to the original visual that we saw with all the scroll bars. Now, another shortcut that people don't realize often is that these selectors, you don't have to go to legends to disable them. You can actually disable them, hover over this little thing, and it lets you disable it. I think this feature came out in Spotfire version 7.6 or 7.8. So most new versions of Spotfire should nicely be able to just access it from there and turn it on and turn it off. All right, everyone, thank you so much for staying with the session today. We hope to get your feedback on the form that you will see immediately after the session gets over in the browser. Send us your feedback and also send us your questions on community with #DrSpotfire or on Twitter. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.